The 400-year silence shatters not with a thunderclap, but with the scratching of a pen. Matthew begins by tracing a royal bloodline, a golden thread running from Abraham through King David, proving that the long-awaited heir has arrived. But the king's entry is unconventional. He is born to Mary, a virgin, protected by Joseph after a celestial messenger calms his fears in a dream. Across the desert, Magi follow a wandering star, bringing gifts fit for a sovereign. Their arrival triggers a fever dream of political terror, as the paranoid King Herod attempts to extinguish the light, forcing the Holy Family to flee into Egypt under the cover of night. Fast forward 3 decades. The scene shifts to the jagged wilderness of the Jordan River. A wild-eyed man named John, clothed in camel's hair, and smelling of locusts and wild honey, is shouting a revolution. Repent, he bellows, preparing the way. The story reaches a fever pitch when Jesus steps into the water. As he rises from the river, the heavens tear open, the Spirit descends like a dove, and a voice like thunder echoes across the valley. This is my Son, whom I love. With him I am well pleased. The Spirit leads Jesus from the cool waters of baptism straight into the searing heat of the wilderness. For 40 days, he battles hunger and the sibilant whispers of the tempter. Satan offers bread for his belly and kingdoms for his pride, but Jesus strikes back with the word until the shadows flee. Emerging from the desert, the revolution begins at the shoreline. Jesus gathers a ragtag crew fishermen who drop their nets to become fishers of men, but the real earthquake happens on a grassy hillside. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus flips the world upside down. He doesn't look at the powerful. He looks at the poor, the mourning, and the peacemakers, declaring them the true royalty of God. He moves the battlefield from outward rules to the inner heart, teaching that anger is as deadly as a blade, and that love must even extend to enemies. Finally, he hands the crowd a secret weapon against anxiety, a simple prayer to our Father and a promise. He points to the lilies of the field, blooming without effort, and whispers a radical command: stop worrying, seek the kingdom first, and everything else will fall into place. Jesus descends the mountain, his voice still echoing with the sermon's final warning: build your house on the rock, for the rains are coming. The transition from theory to practice is immediate. He doesn't retreat to a palace. He walks straight into the mess of human suffering. In a whirlwind marathon of mercy, the king touches the untouchable. He heals a leper with a hand stretch, heals a Roman centurion's servant with a mere word, and mends a fevered mother-in-law when a violent storm threatens to swallow their boat. He rebukes the wind like a fussy child, leaving his disciples whispering, "Who is this?" The revolution gets personal when he calls Matthew, a hated tax collector, to leave his booth. He scandalizes the religious elite by dining with the wrong people, declaring he came for the sick, not the healthy. Between raising a young girl from the dead and restoring sight to the blind, Jesus looks at the exhausted, aimless crowds. His heart breaks with compassion. He sees a world ripe for harvest but lacking workers, turning his attention from his own miracles to the urgent need for a team to join the mission. The movement matures as Jesus deputizes the 12, transforming them from mere observers into sheep among wolves. He grants them the authority to heal but issues a chilling disclaimer: the world won't always say thank you. Don't pack a bag, he tells them. In this startup, trust is the only currency, and the mission comes before even the tightest family bonds. The tone shifts when a message arrives from a dark prison cell. Even John the Baptist, the desert firebrand, begins to doubt. Jesus sends back a report of sight and life, then turns to the crowd with a startling offer: an easy yoke for those crushed by the weight of religious performance. But the storm breaks in the wheat fields. The Pharisees brandish their rulebooks over the Sabbath, but Jesus declares himself Lord of the Sabbath. Tension boils into a plot against his life. He warns that a house divided cannot stand, and finally redefines the hearth, declaring that his true family isn't bound by DNA, but by the quiet, revolutionary act of doing the Father's will. Jesus changes his frequency, pivoting from direct sermons to cryptic parables. Standing in a boat, he weaves tales of seeds, weeds, and hidden pearls. To the casual listener, they are just farm stories. To the seeker, they are the blueprints of a new world. But at home in Nazareth, familiarity breeds a cold contempt that silences miracles. The atmosphere darkens as King Herod's vanity claims John the Baptist's head. Seeking grief-stricken solitude, Jesus is instead met by 5,000 hungry souls. He turns a meager lunch into a massive feast, proving the kingdom's economy is built on multiplication, not scarcity. That night, the supernatural peak continues. Jesus walks across the churning Galilee, pulling a sinking Peter from the waves. Yet the religious elite remain fixated on unwashed hands. Jesus rebukes their hollow traditions, then heads to the borders to heal a Canaanite woman's daughter. He feeds 4,000 more, signaling that this bread of life knows no borders. The king is no longer just talking about the kingdom, he is physically manifesting its boundary-breaking power. The secret is finally out. At Caesarea Philippi, Peter declares the defining truth: "You are the Christ." But the crown Jesus describes isn't gold, it's a cross. He issues a stark challenge: to follow him is to take up your cross, losing one's life to truly find it. 6 days later, the veil of humanity peels back on a high mountain. Peter, James, and John witness Jesus transformed into blinding light, flanked by Moses and Elijah, glimpse of the king's eternal majesty before the shadow of Jerusalem falls. Descending from the heights, the lessons turn toward the heart of the community. In a world obsessed with status, Jesus pulls a small child to his side, declaring that the greatest is actually the least. He speaks of a shepherd who leaves 99 safe sheep to hunt for one wanderer in the dark. The kingdom's law is now radical reconciliation, forgiving 70 times 7. Through the parable of the unforgiving servant, Jesus warns that the mercy we have received must be the mercy we give. The road to Jerusalem narrows, and the king's demands sharpen. A rich young man walks away in sorrow because his hands are too full of gold to hold the kingdom. Jesus notes the irony: it's easier for a camel to squeeze through a needle's eye than for the self-sufficient to enter. He then describes a vineyard where latecomers receive the same wage as those who toiled all day, a scandalous grace that offends the fair-minded but rescues the desperate. Then comes the shift. Jesus enters the city not on a war horse, but on a lowly donkey. The air thickens with hosannas and palm branches, yet the celebration quickly turns to a storm. He storms the temple, overturning tables and scattering the coins of those who turned worship into a marketplace. "My house shall be a house of prayer," he declares, reclaiming the sacred space. By morning, a barren fig tree withers at his word, a stark warning that the time for religious performance is over. The king has arrived, and the authorities are finally ready to strike. The air in the temple is electric with hostility. Jesus begins with a warning: a king's wedding feast is ready, but the invited guests are too busy or too violent to attend. The invitation spreads to the street corners, a clear sign that the kingdom is moving past the elite. The Pharisees and Sadducees strike back with riddles about taxes and the afterlife. But Jesus silences them with a single, piercing command: love God and your neighbor. Then, the velvet gloves come off. In a blistering critique, Jesus unmasks the religious leaders as whitewashed tombs, beautiful on the outside, but full of decay within. He laments over Jerusalem, his voice breaking for a city that rejects its peace. As he leaves the temple for the last time, he climbs the Mount of Olives. Looking back at the massive stones, he predicts a day when not one will be left standing. He speaks of a world shaken by wars, famines, and birth pains, pointing to a final, cosmic return. His message is a drumbeat for the soul: stay awake. The king is coming, and no one knows the hour. The king's final warnings are a drumbeat of urgency: keep your lamps trimmed, invest your talents, and remember that whatever you do for the least of these, you do for him. But the teaching ends as the shadows of Gethsemane lengthen. In a flickering upper room, Jesus transforms a Passover meal into a new covenant. Breaking bread that represents his own body before stepping into the darkness of the garden. The night turns violent. A kiss of betrayal leads to a kangaroo court, a crown of thorns, and the crushing weight of a Roman cross. At Golgotha, the sky bruises black at midday. As the king breathes his last, the massive temple veiled tears and tooth a barrier between God and man is gone. He is laid in a borrowed tomb, sealed by a stone and guarded by the elite. But death cannot hold the author of life. On the third day, the earth shakes, the stone rolls, and the tomb stands empty. The risen king meets his stunned followers on a Galilean mountainside. He doesn't offer a farewell, he issues a great commission. Go, he tells them, and make disciples of all nations. The Gospel of Matthew ends not with a goodbye, but with the ultimate promise: I am with you always, even to the end of the age.
subscribe.